Before the story begins, please let me know in the comments section down below where you guys are watching this from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can continue to grow and bring you even more engaging stories. The aroma of sautéed garlic and onions, mixed with the rich scent of homemade chicken broth, filled every corner of our tiny apartment in Queens, New York. That morning, like hundreds of mornings before it, began with a joyful rush. My hands moved nimbly across the cutting board, chopping vegetables in a rhythm I knew by heart. In the corner of the kitchen, Chloe, my 5-year-old only daughter, sat at her little table. She wasn't playing with dolls or watching TV. The crayon in her hand moved seriously across a piece of paper, drawing what she called a secret rainbow cupcake recipe just for me. This was our world. A small universe I had painstakingly built upon a foundation of love and the aroma of cooking. 5 years ago, I, Rachel, arrived in this city with nothing but a broken heart and a new life growing inside my womb. I used the severance pay from my old administrative job to rent this cramped apartment and buy the most basic cooking equipment. From there, I started Rachel's Kitchen, a home-based catering business. At first, it was just word of mouth, providing lunchboxes for my neighbors. Slowly but surely, thanks to sheer perseverance and my mother's heirloom recipes, my business grew. Now, I had 2 part-time assistants and a fully booked schedule for small events. We weren't filthy rich, but we had more than enough. We were happy. It was a simple, grounding happiness, as real and comforting as a fresh, warm batch of mac and cheese. As I was mixing batter for an afternoon pastry order, the apartment buzzer rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to open the door. The mailman smiled warmly, handing me a stack of letters. Usually, it was just utility bills and promotional flyers. Today, however, a thick, cream-colored envelope was tucked in between them. It felt different. The envelope was heavy, made of expensive cardstock, and my name was engraved on it in beautiful gold calligraphy. There was no sender's name, only a postmark indicating it came from my hometown, an affluent suburb in Westchester County that I had fled 5 years ago. Carrying the mail inside, curiosity began to tickle me. Chloe, spotting the pretty envelope, immediately ran over. "Mail for Mommy." "It's so pretty," she exclaimed. I smiled, ruffled her hair, and carefully broke the wax seal bearing the initials M and R. Inside was a wedding invitation, more luxurious than anything I had ever held. The paper was thick, with gold-gilded edges. With my heart suddenly beating faster for no apparent reason, I read the names printed on it. "Joyfully invite you to witness the holy matrimony of Mia and Ryan." The name Ryan made me freeze for a second, like hearing an echo in a room that had long been empty. Of course, it's not my Ryan, I thought quickly. The name was common enough. Besides, the Ryan I knew would never have been able to afford a party this extravagant, but the name above his Mia. It felt like it was pulling out every memory I had buried deep down. Mia, my best friend. My soulmate through 4 years of college. My mind instantly flew back to those days. Mia and I were inseparable. We shared a cramped dorm room, ate the last of our ramen noodles at the end of the month, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and cried on each other's shoulders. We shared the same dream, opening a little cafe after graduation. Mia was always the bolder, more ambitious one. She was the one who pushed me to enter the campus culinary competition, which ultimately gave me my confidence. I remembered her as a cheerful, spirited person. Though, I had to admit, there was always a competitive streak in her that sometimes made me feel small. It was a side of her I always ignored because I loved her so much. So why did we lose touch? My mind felt cloudy as I tried to remember. Graduation was the turning point. I got a minimum wage office job. I met Ryan. I fell madly in love. And we started a life together, full of economic struggles. Then, I got pregnant. That was when my world collapsed. Ryan walked out, leaving me at my most vulnerable. Amidst that chaos, I felt ashamed. Ashamed of myself, of my fate. I couldn't bear to face the pitying looks of anyone, including Mia. So, I left. I moved to New York City, changed my number, and cut ties with everyone from my past. I just wanted to turn the page and start a new chapter with my child. Now, this invitation was in my hands, a bridge to a past I had sealed shut. Part of me hesitated. Returning to that town meant reopening old wounds. Walking down streets that held a million bitter memories. Yet, another part of me missed Mia. I wanted her to see me now. I was no longer poor, abandoned Rachel. I was a mother, an entrepreneur. I had made it. I survived. "Mommy, are we going to the party?" "I want to wear my pink dress," Chloe whined, tugging at the hem of my shirt. Her voice snapped me back to reality. I looked down at her hopeful little face. Maybe this was the right time. Maybe it would be good for Chloe to see where her mother came from. Maybe it was time for me to make peace with my past, for the sake of our future. As I was about to slide the invitation back into its envelope, a small piece of paper fell out. It was a note, written in Mia's distinct, slightly slanted, artistic handwriting. I picked it up and read it. "Please come, Rach. I have a massive surprise for you. You have to see this." A faint smile graced my lips. A surprise. I imagined Mia had planned something special, perhaps a small reunion with our other college friends amidst her wedding festivities. The words felt warm, like a hug from an old friend. My doubts vanished instantly. The decision was made. We were going. I grabbed my laptop and opened a ticketing website to book our train ride on the Metro North. As I selected our departure time, my mind was already drifting to what dress I would wear. And, of course, the most beautiful hot pink dress I could find for my little princess. I felt a glimmer of warmth and excitement. The anticipation of a beautiful reunion. I was completely unaware that I was walking straight onto the stage of the most cruel, orchestrated betrayal. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels against the tracks scored the background of our journey. We managed to get window seats, and Chloe pressed her face against the glass. Her eyes sparkled with amazement as the green landscapes and suburban houses of upstate New York rushed backward. The cool morning air blowing from the AC vent brought a sense of fun adventure for my daughter, but to me, it felt like a breath of the past. Every mile we traveled felt like I was being pulled closer to a massive magnet I had long abandoned. "Mommy, tell me more about Aunt Mia," Chloe asked, finally taking her eyes off the window. Her question was like a key opening an old cabinet full of photo albums. I smiled and began to tell stories. I painted Mia as the hero of my tales. I told her how Aunt Mia always defended me if anyone bothered me, how she brought me chicken noodle soup when I was sick in our dorm, and how we once stayed up all night on the roof of the campus library just to watch a meteor shower. I told her all the good things, all the laughter and joy. I deliberately picked out the brightest fragments of my memories, arranging them into a perfect mosaic of friendship for my daughter's little ears. I wanted Chloe to know that before her world consisted only of the two of us, her mother once had a best friend who meant everything to her. However, the deeper I dug into my college memories, the harder it became to avoid the shadow of another figure. A figure whose name I had never once spoken in front of Chloe. Ryan. Her biological father. Even as I talked about the college indie music festival where Mia and I volunteered, my memory automatically played the scene of my first meeting with Ryan backstage. He was the guitarist for an indie rock band performing that night. I vividly remembered his calming eyes, his slightly awkward smile, and how skillfully his fingers danced across the guitar strings. That night, amidst the roar of the crowd, he sang a song while looking straight at me. And I fell in love. I remembered our first date. We had no money, so we just bought 2 pretzels and hot dogs from a street cart and sat in Central Park until late at night. We talked about everything: his dream of becoming a famous musician, my dream of owning a cafe. Back then, anything felt possible. His love felt like fuel that made me believe I could conquer the world. We were 2 young people dreaming of the future amidst a harsh reality. But the time machine in my head kept spinning, dragging me to the darker times. After graduation, we rented a cramped studio apartment and began to feel the crushing weight of real life. Ryan struggled to find a steady job. He tried working odd gigs, but his spirit slowly burned out. Music, which used to be his escape, became his source of frustration. The guitar he used to play for me now sat gathering dust in the corner of the room. His optimism was chipped away by rejections and mounting bills. His complaints became our daily soundtrack. "If only we had more money," or "life just isn't fair," became the phrases I heard most often. Petty arguments became frequent, usually sparked by trivial things rooted in financial despair. Then came the night that changed everything. A night that felt so freezing cold, even in the middle of summer. I remembered it perfectly. I had just returned from the clinic after confirming my suspicions from the past few weeks. With trembling hands and a heart pounding with hope, I showed him the test results. I imagined he would be shocked, then pull me into a tight embrace, and the arrival of our baby would be a new source of motivation for both of us. But the reaction I got was far from what I had imagined. His face showed no happiness. All I saw was pure, unadulterated panic. It was as if I had just handed him a court summons. "Pregnant?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Now, Rachel?" At a time like this? That night, our fighting reached its peak. His usually gentle voice turned sharp and piercing. He accused me of being careless, of trapping him in a life that was already too hard. He yelled that a child would be a burden that would drown us both, destroying the last remnants of his dreams. I could only cry in silence, wrapping my arms around my flat stomach as if shielding my baby from her father's cruel words. Finally, he delivered the death sentence to our relationship. "Maybe we just aren't meant to be together, Rach. I'm going to find my own path. You should do the same." He packed a few pieces of clothing into his worn-out duffel bag. Without looking back, he opened the door and walked out. He disappeared into the darkness of the night, leaving me alone with my sobs, shattered dreams, and a fragile new life pulsing inside me. Mommy's crying. The soft touch of Chloe's hand on my cheek pulled me back from the abyss of my memories. I hadn't even realized my tears had fallen. I quickly wiped them away, forcing a smile. "No, sweetie." Just some dust flew into Mommy's eye. I hugged her tight. So tight. The warmth of her tiny body was the anchor keeping me from drowning in the freezing ocean of the past. Her hug was a reminder that Ryan's decision to leave was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me the strength to build this new world. Our world. The announcement over the loudspeaker brought me back. The train was arriving at our destination. As we stepped onto the station platform, the air of my hometown felt both foreign and familiar. The bustle of people, the smell of pretzels and coffee from the station kiosks, it all triggered a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't warm nostalgia, it was a cold premonition creeping down my spine. I gripped Chloe's hand tighter. We walked out of the station and ordered an Uber to the hotel I had booked. Along the way, I stared at the buildings I used to know, feeling like a tourist in my own country. That uneasy feeling grew stronger, like the sky darkening before a storm. I tried to convince myself it was just normal nerves before seeing an old friend. Little did I know, my instincts were right. I was walking straight into the eye of the storm. Upon arriving at the hotel, I felt a genuine spark of joy. The room I had booked wasn't huge, but it was clean and comfortable. With a wide window overlooking the town square, Chloe immediately jumped onto the plush bed with a joyous laugh. Seeing her happy warmed my heart. For a moment, I could forget the anxiety I felt on the train. We unpacked our suitcases, and I pulled out the 2 dresses I had prepared. One was an elegant navy blue evening gown for me. The design was simple, but the tailoring was perfect. I had bought it with my own hard-earned money. That dress represented who I was now. Simple, strong, and independent. For Chloe, of course, a puffy hot pink dress, complete with a large bow at the waist. She looked like a little princess from a fairy tale. As I did my makeup in front of the mirror, I stared intently at my reflection. This was no longer the face of a naive 20-something girl full of dreams. There were fine lines at the corners of my eyes, traces of countless sleepless nights and unshed tears, but the look in my eyes was different now. Firmer, calmer. I had weathered the storm and managed to stand tall. Tonight, I was going to meet my old best friend. Not as poor, abandoned Rachel, but as Rachel. A mother and the proud owner of Rachel's kitchen. That confidence gave me strength. We arrived at the hotel lobby. The wedding was being held an hour later. I gasped. This wasn't just a wedding reception, it was a colossal gala. Thousands of white roses and lilies adorned every corner, cascading from towering marble pillars. Giant crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow that made the entire room sparkle. The guests were dressed in black tie attire, speaking in elegant whispers while enjoying hors d'oeuvres served by white-gloved waiters. For a second, I felt severely underdressed. This world was so far removed from my world of chicken stock and cake batter. A whisper from the past, a voice telling me I didn't belong here, rang in my ears. But I quickly brushed it off. I straightened my back, held Chloe's hand, and walked in with my head held high. I scanned the room, looking for Mia's familiar face, but she was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she was still in the bridal suite getting ready. We found our assigned table, a beautifully arranged round table, not far from the main aisle leading to the altar. I simply gave a polite smile to the other guests at our table, having no interest in starting a conversation. I was too busy observing the luxury around me, trying to guess who the lucky man was that my best friend was marrying. This man had to be incredibly wealthy and influential. I was happy for Mia. She had always craved this kind of life. Shortly after, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly. The soft instrumental music faded, replaced by the voice of the master of ceremonies announcing that the exchange of vows was about to begin. The guests fell silent. All attention was focused on a beautifully decorated dais at the front, complete with an altar draped in crisp white linen. My heart beat a little faster, a natural anticipation of witnessing a best friend's sacred moment. The groom's family processed into the room. I tried to catch a glimpse of the groom's face, but he was seated with his back to me. I could only see his broad shoulders, clad in a custom, ivory white tuxedo that looked absurdly expensive. I couldn't see his face clearly, nor could I see Mia. She hadn't made her appearance yet. Naturally, as tradition often dictates, the bride would make her grand entrance soon. The atmosphere grew quiet and solemn. The officiant began to speak. I smiled faintly. My mind involuntarily drifted to my past daydreams. I had once imagined a day like this with Ryan. Not a party this grand, of course. Just a simple ceremony at a small chapel near my parents' house, witnessed by our closest family. A dream that was shredded before it could ever materialize. Then, the core moment arrived. The officiant asked the groom to state his vows. The groom cleared his throat softly, taking a deep breath to deliver the sacred sentence that would change his life forever. I, Ryan, take you, Mia. That voice. The resonant baritone that filled the silence of the ballroom seemed to pierce through time and space, slamming into my eardrums and stabbing directly into my heart. It wasn't just a voice, it was a key that violently forced open a dark, sealed room at the bottom of my soul. A room I had locked tight for the last 5 years. His voice was deeper now. More authoritative, polished by time and success. But the intonation, the pauses between his words, the distinct way he pronounced his vowels, it was unmistakable. That was the voice that used to whisper words of love in my ear. The voice that shouted cruel insults on our last night together. The voice of the father of the child currently sitting sweetly beside me. My blood felt like it stopped flowing. The smile on my face froze, then shattered into a million pieces. Impossible. My brain screamed, rejecting reality. This has to be a coincidence. People's voices can sound similar. This is just a cruel, illogical coincidence. To be my lawfully wedded wife. As he finished his sentence in one breath, he lifted his head slightly, turning his face to the side toward the best man. The light from the crystal chandeliers hit the side of his face perfectly. And that was when my world completely imploded. The sharp jawline I used to stroke. The straight nose I used to playfully poke. The shape of his ears that I knew so well. It was Ryan. It was actually Ryan. My Ryan. Chloe's father. My breath hitched in my throat. All the sounds around me, the thunderous applause of the guests, the officiant pronouncing them husband and wife, everything sounded like a muffled drone from another dimension. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. He was the groom. And he had just married my best friend. The roaring applause still echoed throughout the room, but I was trapped in a deafening bubble of silence. I sat rigidly in my chair. My eyes were glued to Ryan's figure on the stage. My brain was still spinning wildly, trying to deny what I had just seen and heard. Ryan and Mia. Two names that were once pillars in my life, now united in a bond that felt like a massive conspiracy against me. The invitation, the beautifully engraved names Mia and Ryan, now felt like a sick joke. It wasn't a coincidence. This was all real. A violent wave of nausea rose from my stomach to my throat. I gripped the armrests of my chair, my knuckles turning white, trying to keep my body from collapsing. My gaze then shifted to my daughter, Chloe. With heartbreaking innocence, she was clapping along joyfully. A wide smile plastered across her face. Her eyes sparkled as she took in the festivities around her. She was celebrating her father's wedding. The father she thought was a star in the sky. The father who abandoned her without ever once seeing her face. The bitter reality hit me like a tidal wave, making it hard to breathe. A surge of anger and a mother's protective instinct rose up, overpowering the shock and heartbreak. I had to protect Chloe. I had to get her away from this rotten charade. But how? Running away now would only draw attention. Right at that moment, the MC's booming voice announced the arrival of the bride to join her legal husband. The tall, grand main doors of the ballroom slowly opened. There stood Mia. She looked like an angel. Clad in an ivory wedding gown encrusted with thousands of crystals, her long veil sweeping across the marble floor. She was smiling. The joyous smile that every bride should have. As she began to walk slowly down the red carpet, her gaze swept over the standing guests welcoming her. Reflexively, I tried to duck my head, hoping to disappear into the crowd. But it was too late. Our eyes met. In a sea of unfamiliar faces, our gazes locked. I saw it for a fraction of a second. I saw the surprise in her eyes. But it wasn't surprise at seeing me there, it was the surprise of her plan working perfectly. And then she did it. Something that confirmed all my wildest fears. Mia smiled at me. Not the warm smile of a friend who hadn't seen you in years. No. It was a thin, cold, victorious smirk, a perfectly controlled smile that seemed to say, I see you, I know you're here. Look at this, Rachel. This is the surprise. I won. The handwriting on that little note echoed in my mind again, now with an entirely different meaning. I have a massive surprise for you. You have to see this. The surprise wasn't a friendly reunion, the surprise was this spectacle. A grand stage she deliberately built to flaunt her victory. To show me that she had taken everything I ever had and deemed valuable. A massive war waged inside me. Part of my soul screamed, telling me to grab Chloe and run as far away from this hell as possible. Run and never look back. But the other side of me, the side forged by hardship over the last 5 years, refused to lose. I looked at Ryan, who was now standing next to Mia. He held his new wife's hand, smiling for the photographers, but his smile was stiff and his eyes looked empty. He hadn't seen me yet. He looked like an expensive mannequin. Then I looked at Mia again, standing so haughty and confident. Seeing that victorious smirk burned away the last remnants of my sorrow, igniting it into a blazing inferno of rage. No, I was not going to run. I did not struggle alone to raise my daughter and build a life from scratch, just to run away like a coward, facing the ghosts of my past. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. I was going to face them. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I had to be calm for Chloe. I smoothed down my dress and forced the most neutral expression I could muster onto my face. I built a mask of absolute composure to hide the hurricane raging inside. I turned to my daughter. A gentle smile touched my lips. Chloe, Sweetie, in a little bit we're going to go say congratulations to Aunt Mia. And after that, Mommy promises we'll eat the biggest chocolate ice cream they have at this party. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. Chloe cheered quietly, her eyes lighting up at the thought of ice cream. The grip of her tiny, warm hand in mine became my center of power. This hand was what gave me a reason to survive, to fight. And now, this hand would give me the courage to walk up to that altar. We would walk together, not as pathetic victims, but as living proof of the life they had thrown away. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say or do yet, but one thing was certain. I was not going to let them write the end of my story. Tonight, I was taking the pen back. The music shifted to an upbeat love song, and the MC, with his professional smile, invited the guests to come up to the dais to personally congratulate the newlyweds. This was it. A fine tremor ran through my hands. But I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white, transmuting my fear into strength. I rose from my chair. A simple movement that felt incredibly heavy, as if I were lifting the weight of my past off my shoulders. I straightened Chloe's dress and gave her the most convincing smile I could fake. "Come on, sweetie. Time to shake hands with Aunt Mia and Mr. Ryan," I whispered, intentionally saying Ryan's name for the first time, testing my own strength. Chloe nodded obediently. The walk from our table to the steps of the dais felt like the longest walk of my life. It felt like walking on a bed of invisible thorns. Every step was a conscious effort to stay upright, to not falter. The ballroom, which had felt majestic, now felt suffocating. Filled with laughter and happy chatter that sounded like alien buzzing in my ears. I became hyper-aware of everything around me. The glint of jewelry on the female guests, the clinking of crystal glasses, the overwhelming mix of expensive perfumes and heavy lilies. Several guests in the receiving line smiled warmly at us. Their attention was drawn to Chloe. "Oh, your daughter is absolutely beautiful. So precious," complimented an older woman in a silk shawl standing right in front of us. I could only manage a stiff smile and a brief nod. The compliment felt like an invisible dagger. They were praising the beauty of a child whose father was standing on that stage, prepared to deny her very existence. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it made it hard to breathe. I could only hold Chloe's hand tighter, as if channeling all my strength into her. When, in reality, she was the source of my strength right now. The line moved forward slowly, giving me more time to observe the two figures sitting on their thrones. Mia was the picture of the perfect bride. She laughed gracefully, greeting guests with rehearsed movements, radiating a highly convincing aura of happiness. She looked like a newly crowned queen, savoring every second of her victory party. She looked so comfortable, so powerful on her theatrical stage. Conversely, Ryan looked like a prisoner. The smile he wore never reached his eyes. His eyes darted nervously, glancing around as if looking for an exit or perhaps anticipating a disaster. He shook hands like a robot. His movements and words felt mechanical. I could see him clearly now. He wasn't a cunning, evil mastermind. He was a weak man. A man who chose a shortcut because he was terrified of the struggle. He had traded love, responsibility, and the chance to be a father for this gilded cage. And now, he was terrified, slowly realizing that the cage was locked tight. We were only a few people away from the couple. Ryan was looking the other way, having a brief conversation with a middle-aged male guest. He hadn't seen us yet. But Mia, she knew exactly where we were. I could feel her stare even without looking directly at her. The sharp gaze of a predator watching its prey approach. She wasn't anxious. On the contrary, she was looking forward to this moment. She wanted this confrontation to happen right in front of her throne. This party wasn't a celebration of love. It was a public execution, and my pain was part of the entertainment. Finally, it was our turn. I helped Chloe up the 2 small steps to the dais. The air up here felt different. Heavier, more suffocating, laden with unspoken history and betrayal. The sickly sweet, overpowering scent of Mia's perfume was nauseating. For a split second, my courage wavered. The instinct to turn around and flee screamed loudly inside me. But then I felt a small tug on my hand. Chloe. She looked up at me, her large, clear eyes full of absolute trust. That little tug, that innocent look, was the anchor that held me. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength left in my heart. I stood before them. First, I shook hands with both sets of parents. Just a polite, "Congratulations, sir, ma'am," before shifting over. Then, I stood directly in front of Mia. The sweet music seemed to vanish, swallowed by the sudden silence created between us. It felt like the world shrank. There was only me, Mia, Ryan, and an innocent child standing in the middle of us. Ryan still had his back halfway turned to us, finishing his conversation. Mia's smile widened. As sharp as a razor, as cold as ice, the show was about to begin. I forced my lips to form something resembling a smile. When I spoke, my voice came out as a cold, low whisper. Just loud enough for Mia to hear. "Congratulations, Mia." Saying her name felt like swallowing broken glass. The word was no longer a congratulation, it was a declaration of war. Mia's eyes sparkled with a cruel triumph. She leaned forward, as if to hug me like an old friend. But as her face neared my ear, she whispered in a mocking tone, "Thanks for coming, Rach. I knew you wouldn't have the heart to miss my big day." "So, how's the surprise?" "Spectacular, isn't it?" Her sweet, yet venomous tone was the final confirmation. None of this was a coincidental twist of fate. It was a masterpiece of betrayal that she had meticulously designed. Right at that moment, Ryan finished speaking with his guest and turned around. His gaze, automatically sweeping over to welcome the next guest, landed first on the tiny figure of Chloe. Instantly, his entire body went rigid. The formal smile he had worn all night vanished without a trace, replaced by an expression of naked shock. His eyes locked onto Chloe's face, a miniature reflection of his own, then slowly dragged up to the face of the woman, holding the child's hand. He turned as pale as a corpse. Rachel. A name slipped from his lips without a sound, just the trembling motion of his mouth. The world around him seemed to collapse. His worst nightmare was standing right in front of him, wearing a navy blue dress. Before I could even respond, before Ryan could even begin to piece together the fragments of his shock, Mia acted fast. She tightened her grip on Ryan's arm, a possessive movement asserting ownership. Ignoring her husband, who was frozen like a statue, she focused her attention entirely back on me. Her voice was still a whisper, but now her tone shifted to one of pure arrogance and pride, as if she were recounting the greatest achievement of her life. "Do you want to know a little secret, Rach?" she hissed, clearly savoring every second of my suffering and Ryan's panic. "I was the one who told him to leave you." My heart felt like it stopped beating. I stared at her, speechless. My brain refused to process the sheer malice of that sentence. Mia continued, her confession flowing smoothly without a hint of hesitation. 5 years ago, when he came to me frustrated and desperate, a few days after you told him you were pregnant, I gave him a very simple choice. He could choose to stay with you, go back to your pathetic, broke life, and be forever tied to a pregnant woman who would only drag him down and ruin his dreams. She paused, glancing around at the grandeur of the party with her chin held high, or he could choose me, choose a future. I promised him all of this. My family's wealth, the Harrington real estate empire, a comfortable life. I told him, you and that baby will just be a permanent reminder of failure. So leave her. Forget that dark past ever happened. And look. She ended her sentence with a piercing, cynical smirk. I'm a woman who always keeps her promises. The confession hit me like a hurricane. I staggered emotionally, suffocating under a level of evil I couldn't have imagined. But the devil in the wedding dress wasn't finished. Her cold gaze then dropped to Chloe, who was looking in confusion at the strange interaction between the adults. And the kid, Mia said, using a feigned, light tone as if discussing a small stain on the tablecloth. Oh, don't worry too much about it. Just consider her a souvenir from his dark past. A little mistake that, thankfully, he doesn't have to carry for the rest of his life. A little mistake. Those 3 words were the trigger. The way she degraded my daughter's existence, my flesh and blood, the fruit of my immense struggle, it was the spark that ignited the volcano of rage inside me. My mask of composure shattered into a million pieces. The pain and sorrow evaporated, replaced by a blazing, crystal-clear fury. Enough is enough. I was no longer going to be a victim in their twisted play. My eyes accidentally caught sight of a microphone on a stand near the edge of the stage, left behind by the MC. A wild, reckless, and utterly liberating idea began to form in my mind. This stage was not going to be the stage for their victory. Tonight, I was going to turn it into a stage for my justice. Mia's words, "a little mistake," kept echoing in my ears, burning away whatever patience I had left. The anger I felt was no longer a blind, hot rage, but a cold, calculated fury that gave me sharp focus and purpose. This wasn't about my broken heart anymore. This was about defending the honor and the right to exist of my daughter. I stared at the microphone standing elegantly on its stand. That object was no longer just a speaker. Tonight, it would be my weapon. My gavel of justice. In one swift, fluid, and purposeful motion, I let go of Chloe's hand. I stepped decisively past Mia, who was still looking smug, and Ryan, who was still petrified, and grabbed the microphone off the stand. A brief, ear-piercing screech of feedback erupted as I turned it on. A jarring sound that successfully ripped through the veil of the party's festivities. The sweet background music immediately stopped. Every single activity in the ballroom came to a halt. Hundreds of pairs of eyes simultaneously turned toward the stage. Toward me. An awkward, heavily questioning silence blanketed the room. Everyone was wondering, who is the woman in the blue dress who dares to interrupt the reception? My heart was pounding so hard it felt like a bird trapped inside my ribcage. But my voice, when it finally carried through the speakers, sounded remarkably calm, strong, and echoed to the furthest corners of the ballroom. "I apologize for interrupting the time and joy of the guests here tonight," I began. My tone was polite, but held an undeniable authority, forcing everyone to listen. Whispers started to break out. Guests asked each other, trying to guess my identity. I pivoted slightly, angling my body toward the newlyweds, who were now staring at me in absolute shock. The victorious smirk on Mia's face had vanished, replaced by a mask of anger and disbelief. Ryan looked as if his soul had just been ripped from his body. I just wanted to take this precious opportunity to offer my most sincere, most special congratulations to the bride and groom. I locked eyes with Mia. I pronounced every word with razor-sharp emphasis. "Congratulations to my best friend, Mia," I said, letting the phrase best friend hang in the air, dripping with venomous irony. "Congratulations, because after waiting and plotting for 5 years, you finally succeeded. You got exactly what you wanted by stealing it from someone else's life." A palpable wave of shock rippled through the guests. The gasps and whispers grew louder, like a beehive that had just been kicked. The celebratory atmosphere instantly turned tense and heavy with anticipation. I then shifted my gaze to the pale, trembling groom. And, of course, an even bigger congratulations to the highly honorable groom, Ryan. I purposely paused, letting the silence stretch the tension to its absolute breaking point. I took a step back, reached out, and took Chloe's hand again, gently guiding her to stand right beside me, directly under the stage spotlights. With my free hand still gripping the microphone tight, I looked out over the sea of shocked faces in front of me. My voice rang out again, louder and unshakable, dropping the bomb I had held inside for 5 years. "The father of my daughter here. This is Chloe. She is 5 years old. A little girl that you discarded without a second of mercy before she even took her first breath. When she was still entirely helpless inside my womb, a collective, echoing gasp erupted from every corner of the room. After that gasp, all that remained was silence. An absolute, crushing, deafening silence. Every guest froze in place, their eyes darting wildly from me standing tall, to Chloe looking confused, to Mia whose face was turning red with fury, and finally to Ryan, who was utterly destroyed. This beautiful wedding reception had, in an instant, turned into a public courtroom, and I was the lead prosecutor. The silence blanketing the ballroom felt overwhelmingly heavy, filled with unspoken shock and judgment. Hundreds of eyes were now the jury, fixated on the real-life drama unfolding on stage. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Ryan and Mia's parents. They were deathly pale, enduring unimaginable humiliation in front of all their colleagues and relatives. Mia glared at me with murderous intent. Her flawless bridal makeup couldn't hide the rage and hatred radiating from her eyes. Ryan, on the other hand, was the personification of guilt itself. He didn't dare look at anyone. His gaze was glued to the tips of his shiny dress shoes, as if praying the marble floor would swallow him whole. Chloe, caught in the middle of this silent hurricane, started to feel uneasy. She didn't understand why the atmosphere had suddenly become so hostile. She didn't know why everyone was staring at her. All she knew was that her mother looked very sad, yet very angry, and the man her mother pointed at looked terrified. She tugged at the hem of my dress. "Mommy, why?" she whispered softly. But because the microphone in my hand was still on and highly sensitive, her innocent, little voice was broadcast to the entire room, adding a devastating layer of heartbreak to the tragedy. Hearing my daughter's voice, the anger in my heart softened slightly, replaced by a deep wave of sorrow. I looked down at her face, and my expression instantly melted. All of this wasn't for her to see, but now she was an inseparable part of this moment. Maybe this was the only chance Chloe would ever get to see her father. To know that he was real. I crouched down to her eye level, using my body to slightly shield her from the hundreds of staring eyes. "Sweetie, look at that man over there," I said, my voice gentle but trembling, a tremble that every mother in that room surely felt in their own chest. I pointed straight at Ryan. That is Daddy." The word left my lips feeling completely foreign and incredibly painful. A title that, until now, had only existed in Chloe's bedtime stories. Chloe stared at the broken man on the stage. She observed him with pure curiosity, like a child trying to solve a puzzle. She tilted her head, her brow furrowed deeply. She was surely trying to match the face of this trembling, pathetic stranger with the brave, heroic figure I had always described. The father who had become the brightest star in the sky. After thinking for a moment, she took one small step forward, approaching the microphone stand. She looked straight at Ryan, and with a clear, innocent voice amplified by the speakers for everyone to hear, she shattered the silence with a question. "But didn't you say Daddy was a star in the sky?" she asked. Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was genuinely confused. She looked at me, then at the crowd, as if asking the world for an answer. "Mommy said Daddy was a good man who always watched over me from up there. Why is Daddy here? Did he come down from heaven just to see me in my pink dress?" If my confession earlier was a bomb, then Chloe's innocent question was an emotional nuclear explosion that vaporized any remaining doubt or neutrality in the room. With simple logic, a 5-year-old child had dissected this entire tragedy down to its core. That question told the whole story. 5 years of lies a mother was forced to invent to protect her child's heart. 5 years of longing from a little girl who missed a father she never knew, and the heartbreak of realizing she had been mourning a father who was actually alive and well. The guests could no longer hold back their emotions. Several women began to sob, pulling tissues from their designer purses. The shocked whispers rapidly evolved into growls of anger and scoffs, directed squarely at Ryan and Mia. The perfectly orchestrated, high-society wedding was now shattered into a million pieces, not by screams of rage or profanity, but by the innocent question of a little girl whose heart had just broken. Chloe's innocent question was the final verdict. All the sympathy in that room now undeniably belonged to us. The guests' anger, previously just whispers, now found its voice. They were business associates, socialites, and respected relatives of the Harrington family. They came to celebrate a sacred union, only to realize they had been tricked into attending a cruel exhibition of hypocrisy. "Coward!" shouted a man in a tuxedo from the front row. "You have no conscience," yelled a woman, her voice shaking with rage. An older woman sitting near the stage, who seemed to be an old family friend, stood up and pointed straight at Ryan. "I knew your father, Ryan. He would be rolling in his grave seeing what you've done. What kind of man are you? Abandoning your own flesh and blood for money?" she screamed. That shout broke the dam. Other guests joined in, hurling insults and slurs. Mia and Ryan's parents tried desperately to calm the crowd, apologizing profusely with pale faces, but no one was listening. The lavish party they designed to elevate their social status had just become the graveyard of their family's reputation. Several guests began walking out with expressions of absolute disgust, refusing to stay in that room a second longer. Then, a small action triggered a massive chaos. A young man angrily tore the boutonniere off his lapel and threw it at the stage. The action was quickly followed by others. A woman threw her crumpled linen napkin. Suddenly, small objects began flying toward the dais. They weren't dangerous objects, but they were loaded with utter disrespect. Empty plastic cups, pieces of bread from the table baskets, flower heads ripped from vases. Some guests even tore up the wedding programs and threw them at the newlyweds. The dais, which had looked so majestic, was now being littered with trash. Seeing her perfect wedding being destroyed before her eyes, Mia finally lost control. She screamed hysterically. "Not at me, but at Ryan. This is all your fault. Why did you have to show up in my life 5 years ago? Why are you so weak?" She shrieked like a madwoman. Her priceless wedding gown was now stained with splashes of drinks thrown by the guests. Ryan just stood there, silent as a statue, accepting every thrown flower and insult with a blank stare. He was completely broken. His soul seemed to have left his body, leaving behind the empty shell of a man who had lost absolutely everything in a single night. Amidst the chaos, I knew my job was done. Justice was being served, not by my hands, but by the very society they had tried to fool. There was nothing left for me to do here. This was the stage of their destruction, and I had no desire to be a spectator any longer. I crouched down, lifted Chloe into my arms, and buried her face in my neck so she wouldn't have to see this ugly scene. "It's over, sweetie. We're going home now," I whispered, kissing her forehead. With my head held high, I turned and walked down the steps of the dais. The angry guests reflexively parted for me, like the parting of the Red Sea. Many of them looked at me with eyes full of deep sympathy. Some even nodded their heads in a sign of respect. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. From behind me, I could still hear Mia's hysterical screams, the sound of her parents crying, and the roar of insults from the guests. Those sounds were the soundtrack of a wedding, a reputation, and a life being violently shattered to pieces. Karma came so fast, so directly, and so humiliatingly, and it felt absolutely just. 1 year later, the morning was bright, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of toasted bread, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. I stood in the middle of a spacious, gleaming commercial kitchen, much larger than the one in my old apartment. This was the kitchen of my very own cafe, a dream I had once shared with a trader, which I had now achieved all by myself. On the wooden sign, hanging in front of the shop, beautifully carved letters read, "Chloe's Cafe." My life had completely changed. After that chaotic wedding night, my story spread through word of mouth and eventually went viral on local social media. Many people sympathized with me and were curious about my catering business. Orders poured in. Through hard work and a small business grant from a women's empowerment organization that had been moved by my story, I managed to open this cafe 6 months ago. People came out of curiosity, but they returned because the food was delicious and the atmosphere was cozy. I was now financially stable, respected as a female entrepreneur, and most importantly, my heart was at peace. Chloe, who was now 6 years old, was growing into a cheerful, smart child. We had worked through the trauma of that night with the help of a child psychologist and a mother's boundless love. To her, the man at the party was just a mean man who made mommy sad. Her world was full of color, and she knew she was safe with me. While I was wiping down the counter during a quiet hour, one of my employees, Sarah, slid her phone toward me. "Rachel, look at this. The news from yesterday." I took the phone and read the headline. "Hit by wedding scandal and loan defaults, Harrington real estate empire on the brink of bankruptcy." Holding my breath, I read the article. It clearly detailed how the disastrous wedding scandal was the catalyst for the downfall of Mia's family business. The scandal caused them to lose face and the trust of major investors, who pulled their funding one by one. Battered by a terrible public image and a series of panicked business decisions, their arrogant empire was now collapsing. The article also mentioned the fate of the couple. Ryan and Mia officially divorced before their marriage even hit the 3-month mark. The public pressure and the unbearable shame had poisoned their relationship from the inside out. Mia, unable to bear the humiliation and the loss of all her luxuries, reportedly moved out of state, living in exile. And Ryan. The last paragraph detailed his fate. He was immediately fired from his executive position at Mia's family company. He tried to return to the music scene, but his name was tainted. He was mocked everywhere as the deadbeat dad who abandoned his kid. The latest reports said he was working as a cashier at a gas station convenience store on the outskirts of town, living alone in a cramped rented room, drowning in regret. I remembered that a few months ago, an old mutual friend tried to contact me, saying Ryan wanted to apologize. I never replied. I handed the phone back to Sarah. There was no overflowing sense of triumph in my heart. There was no lingering grudge. All there was a deep, absolute sense of closure. Their story was over. They were no longer a part of my world. Their fates were now nothing more than a footnote in the book of my life, which had already opened a new, beautiful chapter. I walked over to the large window of my cafe. In the small garden I had deliberately built next to the patio, I saw Chloe playing on the swings. Her crisp laughter carried all the way inside, that sound. The pure, unburdened laughter of my daughter. That was my true victory. That was my sweetest revenge. I opened the door and walked out to her. Pushing her swing gently, I laughed along with her under the warm morning sun. We hadn't just survived, we had found our happiness, and that was more than enough. 5 years had passed since the night that changed everything. 5 years is a long enough time to heal wounds, rebuild a life, and turn the rubble of bitter memories into a solid foundation for the future. Today, Chloe's Cafe was celebrating its 5th anniversary. The place I had started with reckless courage and a wing and a prayer had now blossomed into one of the most beloved cafes in the city. We had moved into a larger 2-story building with a floral garden in the back that had become a weekend favorite for local families. The cafe walls were decorated with cheerful paintings by Chloe and pieces by local artists who had supported us from the beginning. The aroma of freshly ground espresso, mingling with the scent of buttery pastries straight out of the oven, created a symphony of smells I longed for every single morning. I, Rachel, was no longer the same woman. I wore my hair cut shorter, more practical, with a few strands of silver starting to show at my temples, traces of wisdom that I had paid a steep price for. I now managed 15 employees whom I considered family. I no longer walked with the hyper-vigilance of a victim, but with the confidence of a leader, a survivor, a mother. My daughter Chloe was now 10 years old. She was growing into a brilliant, empathetic young girl with an incredible sense of humor. She was the sun in my universe. That afternoon, amidst the bustle of the cafe's anniversary party we were throwing for our loyal customers, Chloe helped me hand out slices of a giant rainbow cake. She did it with an adorable, professional smile, acting as if she were the junior manager of the place. Watching her laugh freely with the other kids in the garden, my heart swelled with a gratitude so immense it made my chest tight. This was my treasure. This was my victory. Later that night, after the cafe closed and the employees had gone home, it was just the two of us. We sat on one of the plush sofas in a dimly lit corner of the cafe, enjoying leftover cake and mugs of hot chocolate. This peaceful atmosphere often invited our deepest conversations. "Mom?" Chloe called softly, breaking the silence. Earlier, Mr. Bill from the bookstore across the street told me you were the most amazing woman in the world because you built all of this by yourself. I smiled, stroking the top of her head. Mommy wasn't by herself. I had you. She went quiet for a moment, stirring her hot chocolate. Yeah, but he meant without. Without a dad. My heart skipped a little. It always did whenever this topic came up, but I had learned not to avoid it. I had told her the real story gradually, adjusting it for her age, guided by a wise child psychologist. She knew her father was alive. She knew what happened at that wedding, even if her memories of it were hazy. Mom, she continued, this time with a more serious look in her eyes. The look of a child beginning to grasp the complexities of the adult world. Back then, did you ever really love him? I took a deep breath, looking at my daughter's face, which was now searching for honesty, not a fairy tale. I did, sweetie. I answered truthfully. A long time ago. Before I knew you were coming, before the world felt so heavy, he was a different person. He was a guy who could make me laugh with the dumbest jokes, a guy who had huge dreams and eyes that lit up whenever he talked about music. I loved that man. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But people can change, Chloe. Sometimes the hardships of life make people forget who they really are. They make bad choices because they're scared. And the choice he made was one that hurt us deeply, but I reached out and took her hand. That very same choice is also what indirectly led us here, to this cafe. To the amazing life we have right now. The darkest night of my life actually became the beginning of our brightest morning. So, Mommy doesn't hate him anymore. I just simply don't think about him. Chloe nodded slowly, seeming to process the answer. It appeared to be enough for her. We went back to eating our cake in a comfortable silence. But fate, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. As if listening in on our conversation, the little bell above the cafe door chimed, signaling someone had walked in. I was about to say that we were already closed. But as I lifted my head, the words got caught in my throat. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was gaunt, almost skin and bones. The flannel shirt he wore looked faded and swallowed his frame. His hair was slightly overgrown and unkempt, and his face was marked by a thin scar above his eyebrow and dark bags under his eyes, making him look decades older than his actual age. He looked hesitant, as if unsure whether to step inside or turn around and leave. For a few seconds, I didn't recognize him, but then, his eyes met mine. Eyes that were once full of starry dreams now looked dull, hollow, and overflowing with despair. Ryan. Time seemed to freeze. The ticking of the wall clock sounded deafeningly loud. Chloe, who didn't clearly remember his face, just stared at the strange man with an inquiring look. Ryan didn't look at Chloe. It was as if he couldn't bear it. His gaze was locked solely on me, Rachel. His voice was raspy, barely a whisper. I stood up slowly, positioning myself slightly in front of Chloe protectively. I wasn't scared. What I felt was complete emptiness. The man in front of me was so foreign, so pathetic. He was a ghost from the past who had lost all power to haunt me. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice was cold and flat. I heard. "Your business is doing really well," he stuttered. I need a job. Any job. Washing dishes, sweeping floors, I'll do anything." Wah! He dropped his head, unable to meet my eyes. "I've tried everywhere. Nobody will hire me." His request was so pathetic it was almost absurd. He didn't come to apologize. He didn't come to see his daughter. He came because he was at rock bottom and he saw me as his absolute last resort. Not as a lost love, but as a lifeboat. I walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. "Listen to me, Ryan," I said, my voice quiet, yet as immovable as a mountain. "This kitchen, every plate and glass in it, was built on the tears you caused. Every chair and table in this cafe is proof of the sleepless nights I spent raising your child completely alone. Every penny of profit I make is the result of the sweat. That should have been your responsibility too. I stared straight into his eyes, which were now welling with tears. You have no rights here. You have no right to my success. You have no right to this place. And you lost your rights as a father a very, very long time ago. This place is called Chloe's Cafe, not the Cafe of Second Chances. Now get out. He looked utterly shattered. Perhaps he had hoped for yelling, screaming, or sobbing. But all he got was ice-cold composure and absolute rejection. He glanced at Chloe for a split second, just a brief flash, then turned around and walked out, disappearing into the dark of the night. I felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no pity. Just a period at the end of a sentence, a chapter that was finally, permanently closed. A few weeks after that incident, an old college friend who now lived out of state came to visit the cafe. After catching up on various things, she suddenly said, "Hey Rach, have you heard about Mia?" I shook my head. That name rarely crossed my mind anymore. I ran into her last month when I was back visiting my parents in Westchester, she explained. I almost didn't recognize her. She's working as a cashier at a dingy little grocery store. She looked so ragged. When I said hi, she looked mortified. We talked for a bit. She sounded so incredibly bitter. She blames Ryan. She blames her family for going bankrupt. She blames everyone in the world except herself. She's trapped in her own venom. Rach, the money is gone, her looks are fading, her friends abandoned her. All she has left is regret and anger. It was actually really sad to see. I listened to the story in silence. So, that was the end of her tale. Not prison or absolute destitution, but a much more subtle and perhaps crueler punishment. Living forever in a prison of hatred she had built herself. She got the world she wanted, and that world collapsed on top of her, leaving her with nothing, not even the ability to love herself. That night, after a long day of work, Chloe and I sat on the couch in our living room, flipping through old photo albums. I showed her pictures of me when I was in college. Photos of me laughing freely with friends. A photo of when I won my first culinary competition. A photo of my college graduation, smiling full of hope. Look, Mommy, you were pretty when you were young. Chloe giggled. I smiled. Of course I was. I looked at that photo of my past self. A naive girl who didn't yet know how brutally the world could treat her. But I no longer felt sad for her. Instead, I felt proud. That girl fought. She fell. She bled. She was broken into pieces. But she rose again, stronger than ever before. I had forgiven. Not for Ryan or for Mia. I forgave the past for my own sake. I forgave myself for being so naive. Forgiving had set me free. My best revenge wasn't their destruction, it was my happiness. A whole, unbreakable happiness that I had built with my own 2 hands, brick by brick. I hugged Chloe tight, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo from her hair. Outside, the stars began to appear in the night sky. One of them shone brighter than the rest. I used to point to that star and tell Chloe that was where her father was. Now, I no longer needed to lie. I could point to my own heart and say, "Everything we need is right here, sweetie. It's always been right here." And amidst the echoes of our laughter warming our home, I knew that our story was not a tale of revenge, it was a story of rebirth. And our sunrise was just beginning.